Hey guys, you're watching the Best Practices Show, where we take a look at the best business practices from the best dental practices all across the country. And the single hardest thing about owning a practice is when you have to let somebody go. So today, we're going to talk about the things they didn't teach you about firing somebody in dental school with my good friend, Laura Hatch. Do not miss this. Do me a favor, grab a pen and hit the share button. We'll see you in a second. Hey guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show. Thank you so much for watching. We are crazy grateful now, and every single week seems like things just get more and more wild around here. Up to 16,000 followers and over 250,000 views, and now 16,000 on iTunes. So keep sharing with your friends and keep sending us suggestions for things you want to see. And today is one of those things you want to see, because hiring somebody sometimes is easy, but firing is even harder. So how do we do that? And I've got my good friend Laura Hatch from Front Office Rocks on here, and you're going to love this. So don't miss this. Now, a couple things. We're shooting this live on Facebook. So if you have a question during the feed, add it, and I'll ask Laura directly, and we'll get the answer straight from the expert herself. Or if you're watching this later on, add the question to the feed, and we'll make sure we get you the right answers, because I want to make sure you're getting the most out of this. Now, if you haven't heard her story before, I want you to hear it this time, because she's one of those people that's come on the scene and just continues to grow. Like, I've only known you for I think less than a year, right?
Yeah, Linda, we just met last fall, or right before ADA.
Yeah, last fall, and it's like I see you all the time. You're everywhere. You're on videos. You're here, you're there, and you've got a company called Front Office Rocks. If somebody hasn't heard your story and they've been living under a rock, what's your story? Like, who is Laura Hatch?
So I am an office manager. My husband is a dentist, graduated from University of Maryland in '99. I got pulled into this industry because he said, hey, come be my office manager. So I've been his office manager since we opened our first practice in 2003. And we've now opened our second practice in 2008, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. So my story is I'm an office manager. I'm sticking to it. But I started Front Office Rocks about 4 years ago, and Front Office Rocks is an online training resource for front office teams, for anybody in the dental office. But they're online training videos to help train our teams on all of the ins and outs and idiosyncrasies that we deal with at the front desk, because I didn't feel like there was a good training resource for us out there. When I got into dentistry, there was nowhere for me to go to learn how to do my job. I had to figure it out, and I now share a site that will help other dentists not have to go through that. It's a site there to help you train new employees and current employees to get better at their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just got back from SCN, the Speakers Consulting Network, where I didn't get a chance to go this year, but it was a great opportunity for you just to keep learning and keep adding to the educational world and working together. Pretty special experience, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's very interesting, because just on a side note, my husband and I never used a consultant in our history. I guess I kind of was his consultant. I don't know. And so when I'm not a consultant, I don't go in office. I don't profess to be a consultant, but I am a trainer and I am a speaker. And so I joined SCN last year, and I kind of went in not knowing what to expect. And I have to tell you, between the two consulting groups that I know of, ADMC and SCN, there are hundreds of people out there like yourself that are there to help dentists do better. Right. And I know some amazing people from this organization. There's a lot of resources out there. So if you're a dentist listening to this and you're struggling, there are people there to help you. And it may not have to be a big consulting, but there's these kind of videos and interviews and stuff, but there are people out there to help. So I'm just super thrilled that I got to be part of the conference this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about dentists struggling, this is one of the things that dentists struggle with a lot. The last episode that we did together, we talked about the secrets and essentials to hiring, which was fantastic. So if you missed that, you're going to want to go back and see that. Now, today, we're going to talk about letting somebody go. And I always like to use the word freeing up somebody's future. You know, it sounds a little bit nicer because we're always looking for nicer ways to do this inevitably hard thing, but it's essential. Like, before we get into this, let's talk about why firing is equally as important as hiring.
Okay, so let's go for about 20 minutes now. I've got all these ideas and thoughts.
Right.
You have to go back to the beginning. Okay, so, I'm married to a dentist, and I've worked with a bunch of dentists over the years, and I know that hiring and firing is one of the stressful parts of owning a business.
Right.
And honestly, for me, it's not. I have a background in human resources. I have a background in organizational development. So that's what building a business is based on: hiring the right people, training the right people, letting the people go that aren't a right fit for your business. But for dentists, typically this becomes a very stressful part of running a business. So one of the things is to really look at yourself. One of the things I always teach is to look internally before you worry about what to do externally. So you own a business. You have to get over hiring and firing. You have to get over. I know a lot of dentists are worried about turnover. What are my patients going to think if there's a new receptionist at the front desk, or if we hire a new hygienist? Half the time I find when we let somebody go or there's turnover in my office, if that person wasn't a fit, I usually hear from the patients after the fact. And I'm sure you've heard this, where they say, she was not very nice, or every time I came in, so there is a benefit to being okay with, and I know it sounds bad, that 4-letter word fire, I don't actually feel like I fire most of my employees. I feel like we go separate ways, and I'll talk about that. But we have to get over that negativity about it, because you're helping somebody find another position that's better suited somewhere else because they're just not good fit for our office. So you have to look at this idea as not so negative. I guess that would be the first thing I would have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too is that when you age, this helps you, because when you're young, you're not so willing to do this, and you're fearful and you're hesitant. But the older you get, one of the things you have to let work for you is that you have less tolerance for the way things used to be. So, and it's important too, because your business is growing, your practice is growing, and you can't necessarily lower your standards because somebody's not willing to make the trip. So this is an important conversation. And you and I were talking beforehand, before we get started, you don't really fire people. You let them work themselves out of a job. Can you define that? What does that mean?
Well, it all starts, if you have to go back and watch the last interview you and I talked about, because it all starts from that first day the employee starts. We shouldn't just put somebody on the job and go, okay, good luck, have fun. You're hired now and you got a 20-year career with us. I mean, you should be watching the employee from the beginning, and you should be making sure they're a good fit. Just because you hired them doesn't guarantee they're the right person. Right. You've hired them, but now we need to make sure. One of the things that I talk about is fast hire, fast fire. Mm-hmm. Meaning, we tend to, and I don't know if we talked about in the last interview, that we tend to sometimes wait too long to hire somebody. And then we're really desperate, or we'll just take anybody who breathes and has Dentrix experience, and we should hire when we need it.
Right.
And then we should be okay to let somebody go that's not a good fit, even if it's day 2, 3, or 4 on the job.
Right.
It's actually easier to let somebody go when they've only worked for you 3 or 4 days than 3 or 4 years.
Right.
I've had a lot of employees who've come and gone, and I couldn't tell you their name, and they were only with us for a few days, and I just knew through constant communication with them and monitoring them that they weren't gonna be a fit. And I think so many times we think, it's kind of like dating. Like, if I meet a guy and I'm like, this is the guy, but I need to fix him a little bit. I think if I marry him, I can fix him and I can change. Well, you're not going to, most women out there probably know it's pretty hard to change a guy, right?
Right.
So same thing with the employees. If you can see that first week, the employee's gossiping, the employees that employee can't follow through on instructions. They don't have good customer service skills. It's not that they need to know the job inside and out, but you're not going to change some of that stuff. You're not going to. And so what we do is we tend to hold on too long. And then when it's time to fire them, it really sucks, because now they've been with you too long. So, from the beginning, I want to make it really clear with that employee. I want you to do this. Okay, you didn't do that. Why didn't you do that? Okay, can I help you get anything that you need? Okay, I need you to do this. And if I sit down with them 2 or 3 times and I say, okay, I need you to do this, or this may not work out with us, if they're almost getting the option to make the decision, are they doing this or not? And if they make the decision to not do it, then you know what, this isn't going to work out. And most of the time they're like, yeah, this probably isn't going to work out, and no harm, no foul, right? But it's not a big, firing process. It's this just isn't working out. But if you just put somebody on their job and let them go, and you turn your head and don't watch them, you're not going to have that ability to make sure that this is going to be a long-term employee for you.
Right. And I think what you're talking about is just going back to really clear expectations when you hire them, and then just making sure you stick to them. It's almost like when you raise children, you give them boundaries, and when they cross them, there has to be circumstances, and then they know, oh, you're not messing around. But the more you don't give expectations, the more you're left with whatever you get. Right.
Right. And to, and again, I'm not trying to pick on dentists, but I know you have a lot of dentists listening to this. And so I'm trying to be the voice for you, because I'm married to a dentist. So I know, right? My husband would prefer to sit in his office, ignore what's going on with the girls up front, do his dentistry, not have to sit down and talk to you about expectations and are you following through or not. But your employees need to know. They need to know how they're doing. And it's your business, and if you have an office manager, great. The office manager needs to be able to do this.
Right.
But somebody has to be in communication with that new employee or current employees. If issues start to arise, somebody has to talk to them. What we tend to do is we tend to wait too long. We start making like a check sheet. Well, she was late to work yesterday. She didn't do that project I gave her. She didn't go get the instruments I needed, whatever. And then you're so frustrated or mad that it makes that firing process so negative, when really along the way we might have been able to salvage that employee and fix them, or at least we made it very clear. So if it doesn't work out, they knew, and they still opted to come into work late, and they still opted to take a long lunch or whatever the problem was.
Right. So break this down in somewhat of a treatment plan for us. So would you say first thing is have a detailed plan and expectations for someone, and then check in with them? Let's say I'm a dentist and I don't have the luxury of having a Laura Hatch in my office or an office manager. What do I do?
Okay. So yes, I think that, and that's part of the reason I actually have Front Office Rocks, just on a side note, is people are like, if I could clone you and be my office manager. So I'm trying to give resources to help dentists. So clear expectations from the beginning. And I have a lot of this available on my website, like job descriptions, first week check sheet. I'm doing, one of the big issues we have in a dental office is drama and gossip and backstabbing and all the girl issues. All of that has to be managed. And so the doctor needs to become good at communicating when issues arise. Now, when it comes to a treatment plan for handling issues with employees, you got to do it right then. You got to do it. I'm not saying like leave your patient in the middle of a crown prep to go talk to somebody about coming back late from lunch, but don't let it go 2, 3, 4, 5 days, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. When somebody is doing something that's not right and they're not following their job description, or they're not, you need to handle it, the end of the day, the next morning, and sit down and talk to them when it's not a big deal. It's kind of like a marriage. Like, if we, and you've been married a really long time with your wife, and my husband and I have been married 20 years. And, when we say that, hey, can we talk for a second? It's like, oh, right. But if we do it regularly and we just talk about the small issues, they don't turn into big issues.
Right.
Like, I didn't like it the way you handled this or that. We have to do the same thing with the employees. The hard part is doctors, typically that's hard to do, but the more you do it, it's like practice, right? The more you sit down and your employees want to hear if they're messing up, unless they're kind of trying to work their way out of a job. If they're messing up, they want to know, right? Yeah. And if you don't talk to them and they messed up and you don't say something to them, they go, oh, okay, well, I guess it's not important. And then they do it again, and then they do it again, and it just builds. It doesn't need to build. You can, but address it when it happens, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. So, I've heard people say this too. You have to break it down into some type of a system. And I like how you think. I don't know who said this, but somebody said this, make sure you set very clear expectations and timeframes that you don't have to overthink it. Like 3 days, this has got to be done. You have to know this much, and then 3 weeks, this has to be done, and then 3 months, we're fully into it. So if they don't make the benchmark, if you ask them to learn what a crown is, an abutment, our fees, the name of our practice, blah, 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 and they don't learn it in 3 days, that's conversation one. That's strike one. And then you might say, hey, look, I don't know if there's going to be a strike 2 or strike 3 if you don't figure this out in the next day or two. But so I'm just trying to think in terms of a system to make this easy for dentists as they look forward to the future, because sometimes you're right. It just grows and grows and grows. And you're like, I got to let her go. But here's what happens. You don't do that. And they pull all these people in with them. And then everyone starts to underperform. And before you know it, you have a mess on your hands.
Yeah. And that's the there's so many issues. There's so much to talk about, right? So if it's like they're not learning what a crown is in a day, okay, so then you sit down and you go, like, for example, with Front Office Rocks videos, my team has a certain number of videos they have to watch every week. So if at the end of the week they didn't watch it, I sit down with them and say, okay, well, why didn't you? Did we not give you enough time? Did you not understand my expectations? Did you not? Okay, let me help you. And then, hopefully they do it the next week. Now, if it's 2 and 3 and 4 weeks and they're not doing what I've asked, I'm going to be like, I've asked you, I've given you all the resources. I need you to do this. If you don't do this now, you're actually not doing your job. Right. And we may have issues, So this is where you're making it clear with them to say, I'm giving you the choice.
Right.
You do the job or this may not work out. Right. But then that's different than blatant not following the rules, showing like to work, leaving early without. So there's different levels of how strict you have to be. I mean, there was on Dental Town, there was a conversation going on where a doctor went to lunch and he said his schedule's been falling apart. So he went to lunch for a longer lunch than he planned because he didn't have many people on the schedule. And he came back and his office manager and dental assistant were getting high in the back on nitrous. And he wanted to know if he should let them go. Okay.
Okay.
And almost every dentist who commented before me said, no, you can't let them go because it's your office manager. And I'm thinking, why do you think your schedule's falling apart? Your 2 team members are in the back getting, high on nitrous. So for me, that's a fireable offense. Like, so there's a different level of, okay, they're running a little late in the morning. Let's talk to them. How can you get to the office earlier? You actually, are out gossiping or, doing something against our practice. Well, you have to decide, what's important and what needs to be handled right away and what can be, give them a little bit more time, if that, makes sense.
Yeah, man. It does. It does. Now, how many days, I got to ask you this question. How many days for you do you realize this is what I have? Do you know, do you have a time frame? Because I've heard people say about 30 days, you know what you have. Some people say, no, you know what you have in like 3 days. What is your thought process?
I mean, depending on what but I say the first week.
The first week.
I know within the first week, if there are, and it's those things you have to determine, is it something that's super important? Right. Like I have in my office, it's really important you smile. So it's written in all my policies. Patient walks in, you smile. You see another employee, you smile. So not everybody naturally smiles. So if I have an employee and it's the first week and they're not smiling as much as I want, I'd sit down and explain to them, this is why. It makes everybody feel good. And it's just something I want you to get the habit to do. And if I have an employee that's like, okay, I'll try more. I'll try, I'll tell them to put a sticky note on their computer or whatever. That's good, right? I had an extern who does a dental assistant, and I kept sitting down with her. I kept saying, you need to smile. You need to smile. Like in front of patients, you smile. So she passed me. It was her 3rd day with us. She passed me in the reception area, and she was like this. And she saw me. She goes,
oh, gosh.
Okay. Right there, that's attitude.
Yeah.
Now we have a bigger problem, right? She didn't make it past that day. But that's, it's day 3. She's giving me an attitude about smiling. She's going to be giving me attitudes going forward about so many other things. So that's where, but it's a judgment call, which is the hardest thing. And a lot of times we don't have, you're the dentist, you're the owner, you got to make a decision, and we don't have anybody to make that decision with. So you really have to kind of go with your gut and your laws, your state laws and HR and all that. But I say the first week. I mean, within the first week or within the first week of somebody messing up. Like if somebody's been great and now they're starting to mess up, we need to get that handled because something's changed and we need to figure out what that is. We don't want it to drag out because it's just going to grow. Like you said, it's like a fungus. It's just going to grow amongst the practice.
Right. And when it comes to actually letting somebody go, you hear this from a lot of attorneys, a lot of lawsuits, they're really driven emotionally. It happens. It's not really logical. People get upset and I've heard this from so many people. I want to know if you agree. When it comes to talking to a team member and you're going to have to let them go or there's a possibility, you always describe what the business needs in this role. You never say, you did this, you did this. This practice needs somebody who's going to show up on time, who's going to smile, who can do this job really well. And if you can't, I have to find another person that can. Now, you study this stuff. Yep. So how accurate is that?
I think it's completely accurate. And I think that when you actually let the person go, when it's just, there's just not a position for you here anymore. I've been advised on that. You put as least as possible in that right. Final letter, because you don't want to be held for anything specifically that you said in there. But along the way, you need to be clear on what, you can't just say, we just need you to be happier. Mm-hmm. Well, what does that mean, right? Yeah. So when a patient walks in, I want to see you smile. When a patient walks in, I want to see you stand up and shake their hand and greet them. Like, you have to be very specific. You have to ask them, do they understand? Because sometimes they don't understand what you need. They don't know what you're talking about. I like to give examples. And so if I'm going to sit down and talk to somebody, I'll say, like last Tuesday, I saw you act this way to the patient, so that way they can see, and then be really clear, like you said, that these are the expectations of your job. And if you can't do them, I understand, but there may not be a job here for you if you don't start doing them. And right. And then make sure and again, check your state law, make sure you get documentation, make sure you're keeping track of these conversations. So when you get to, I tend to, depending on the severity, have 3 sit downs with the employee. And by that third time, I'm literally like, what is it? I think you do the quote, help me help you, or right? Like, right. I really want you to do well. I really do, because I don't want to go through having to hire again. This sucks, but I have already told you 3 times what I need you to do. What can we do to help you? Because if you don't do this, we are going to have to part ways. Yeah. And just put it on their lap, And when you go to sit down to let them go, if you've already sat down with them 3 times about this, they're not going to be, they have to be clueless to be surprised when you let them go.
Yeah, a couple tools. And I don't know, I want to know if you agree with this. I heard Tony Heisch say this from Zappos. He said the ultimate test of an employee, long-term team member, is would you want to have a drink with them? Not that you will, not that you should, but you're like, after an event and you're like, I want to have a drink with them. Like, I enjoy their company. And because if you're doing that in a position where you own the business, they're performing well. They're adding a lot. When you say, I don't know, that's when you're kind of on the fringe. And that's one of those things you have to question yourself in that whole process. I agree with you too. If you're in the 3rd sit down, it's pretty much you're managing the end. Nobody ever rehabilitates themselves and says, that was so close. You almost fired me. Remember all those sit downs we had? Yeah. But man, I totally redeemed myself and I'm so much better now. That doesn't happen either.
Well, I'm going to tell you, just to give faith out there to those who are listening. I have, and I'll have to tell her to listen to this. I had a dental assistant. She's been working with us since 2008, 2009. Great girl, best dental assistant we've ever had. My husband to this day, wonderful dental assistant. But she started partying a little bit, and she'd show up to work late, and I'd say, you can't do that, and you have to be on work on time. And then finally one day, she didn't come in, she didn't show up, and she had lost her cell phone the night before, she couldn't call us. So she comes walking in 2 hours after she was supposed to start, and I just sat her down and I said, this is your final warning. And I said to her, and I mean this when I say this, you will never find another dental office like ours. And if you talk to any of my old employees that used to work for me and work other places, they'll agree with you. You're never going to find a job like this. Right. And I said, I was young once. I know what it was like to go out and party. I know what it was like but you're about to lose your job if you do not show up again. Now, that dental assistant never was late to work again. Found a guy, had 2 kids, went to hygiene school, is taking her boards this week, and she's coming back to be a hygienist in my practice. So
that's awesome.
I feel like I'm older than her. I did this once, I understand, but you're about to lose a really good job here.
Right.
And if you mean it and you have an environment like that, if the person's a good person, they're gonna step up. Now, unfortunately, that was one of my stories, and I've had a lot of people leave, but that was a good one, and I'm super excited about that one.
Well, and it goes back to the two things you've already said. Number one, you drew a line in the sand, and
Yep.
she chose not to work herself out of a job.
Yep.
She chose to work herself into a job.
And that was a true office manager dentist battle. And I think there's a lot of people who are listening to this probably have this. Yeah. I was willing to let her go because for me as an office manager, I have patients here. I have no dental assistant. I don't know where she is. Is she alive? I can't run an office like this. That's the best dental assistant we've ever had. My husband could have stood in my way and been like, well, no, we can't lose her. She's the best assistant. What would I do? Right. But he was willing to say, yeah, whatever we need to do. So I know there are some battles out there of dentists and office managers or staff who know that there needs to be some turnover in the practice, right. But the dentist is afraid to make it happen. Right. The dentist is, well, she's been with us for 10 years, or she's always worked the front desk, or how would I get somebody to know insurance claims? You don't build a business on people. You build a business on positions and on duties. The people enhance it. Like, we make it better. But I can find someone to do insurance claims. I can find another hygienist who can, you build it on the positions, and the people make it better. And so many dentists, I hear them say, well, I couldn't let her go. She's like family. She's been here so long. She's like family. I think it's great that your staff and everybody gets along. But at the end of the day, you're not family. Unless you're married to the dentist like I am, or, the daughter or something. At the end of the day, I pay my employees for a job, and I give them a great place to work. I give them a wonderful environment. And in exchange, I expect they're going to do these things. And if they're not doing them, I might have hung out with you for the last 10 years, but I need you to do this job. And if you're not doing it, we have a business to run. And I feel like there's a lot of dental offices who are holding themselves back because they're holding on to that employee. That's just, right. She's been there for so long. And that really can really hurt your business.
Right. And I just want to add some clarity that you're not saying being insensitive, that people aren't important. People are crazy important, but you got to have the right people. And if you're a dentist watching this, you know how fast the right dental assistant can change your life. And you go, oh my gosh, like, she changed my whole life in like an hour. And the same thing applies to every other role in the practice. It's critically important that when you own the business, you got to have the right people, because if we look at this on a chart or an Excel spreadsheet, and you look at the number of hours you spend with the people that are right next to you, and you compare it to your children, it's going to make you sick to your stomach. And you're going to go, look, this is too valuable of a process and a business that we've got to have the right people in place so that we all feel good and we go home and we're better people in that whole thing. And sports teams are the best example of this. Like, I thought Brett Favre was going to play for the Packers forever, but obviously they knew something about Aaron Rodgers that I didn't. And it happens in every sports team. There aren't any sports teams that keep all of their players every single year,
Right. Yeah, and what I'm saying, and I agree 100%. I'm not trying to say people are important. I have the best. I would challenge any dental office anywhere. I have the best team because I've learned from this over the years and learning how to hire and learning. But a good team member is going to do their job well. Right. And so if you're getting pushback from an employee and you're holding on to them because they've been with you for so long, or they've, they're a single mom, or they drive, that's the problem. Right. So I'm not saying that, people are, phenomenal, but a good team member is going to jump in and they're going to go the extra mile. If you want to watch the interview with Craig Spodak that you did, talking about millennials, I'm like so tired of hearing about millennials and how do we hire good millennials. You know what? I have 3 millennials on my team, and they're amazing because they understand our bigger purpose. They understand the why behind what we do, and they work super hard because, they get the bigger picture. So having the right team is vital. It can make or break your practice. But if you're holding on to the wrong ones, that's where I'm saying you need to do something about that.
All right. So let's say I'm watching this and I'm going, Laura, you're so spot on. I do all this that you asked me to do. Now it's just come to the point where I got to let somebody go. How do you fire people? How should I fire people? What's the easiest way to fire people? And do I give them a big check on the way out and make them feel better? Because a lot of dentists want to do that. They're like, here, just take my wallet. You can have my car too, because I don't want you to feel bad. So how do you do it?
I think it's funny. The first employee we ever fired, my husband and I, we were brand new at this, and we let our first dental assistant go. And I said to my husband, she's got to go. She's, and my husband's like, okay, that's good. And I said, we're going to do it, at the end of the day today. And he's like, okay. And he's like, so I'll just leave the check and I'll leave and you can do it. Right. like I'm like, no, you have to at least be in the office with me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, I have a degree in HR. So I know all the human resources and all that kind of stuff, but I am not even going to act like I know anything about all the state laws. I'm in California, which alone, we have so many, like we have to follow this, follow that. So I personally work with an HR company, and I recommend everybody does. Make sure you know what you're doing before you fire somebody legally. In each state, it's different. You have to give them a check before they leave? Do you have to give them 2 weeks? All of that kind of stuff. A couple tips that I would say that I always try to let people go at the end of the day. I don't need a big scene in the middle. I mean, unless something happened, like they walked into work drunk or something like that, I don't need a big scene with patients there. I don't need a big scene with the rest of the staff there or patients in the office. I try to be fair. I mean, unless somebody has blatantly done something against our practice and our policies and we need to just cut it, I try to be fair. So we try to give a severance, here's your 2 weeks. We wish you luck. There have been people who I've let go. We've parted ways, and I still give them a good reference. I think they would be great in a smaller dental office that doesn't have the stress that we have, or that, so just because you're letting them go doesn't mean that they're not a good person and that they're not going to fit in somewhere. They're just not a good fit for your practice. So going into that meeting, understanding that and just explaining, this is just not a fit. But again, if you do it the right way and you've sat down with them enough, they already know that.
Right.
I mean, they're not surprised if they show up late 4 times in a row. You've already talked to them the 3 times and given them the warning. They made the decision to show up late, and they're an adult. And so, but yeah, I try to do it at the end of the day. I try not to, based off of my HR company, I try not to give too much. We're not going to go back and rehash the 6 conversations we had. I'm not going to go back and rehash. You said, I said. I'm going to try to keep it as, professional as possible. I'm, wish them luck and have them sign whatever they need to sign. Make sure you get your keys back and your pass cards, because that's a pain in the behind when they leave. And then you're like, oh, I totally forgot to get whatever it is that you need to get. But it really shouldn't be a big drawn out thing. It should be a just quick, and then no matter how well you've handled it, no matter if it was an easy let go or not, it still feels yucky afterwards. Mm-hmm. There's no question. So it's kind of like a breakup. Maybe you knew you were going to break up with this guy and it wasn't getting you right, but it's still not right. It just sucks. So acknowledge it and say it's part of the bad part of owning a practice. And the next time you get a high five from a patient and you love that and you go, that's the best part about owning a practice. It's just part of being a business owner.
It is. And one of the things you and I were talking about before we went on is you do have to document these conversations so that when you go into this meeting and you're convicted on making sure that you're making the right decisions, you've got proper documentation beforehand, correct?
Yeah. And I would say if you're a dentist on your own and or you struggle with this, I would suggest, I think you were saying you guys work with or recommend Brett Erickson, right?
Brett Erickson. Yeah, they're awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's Cedar, there's HR for Health. There's plenty of companies. If you need that advice, if you need the guidance, work with a company like that, because this is what they do to help. And it's going to keep you out of trouble as an owner, but it's also going to give you the, should I talk to them or should I not? And they're there for different levels. So they can be you can call and say, she's been late again. What do I do? And they'll help you. I think there's even companies that will even formulate the letter for you and cut the check for you and basically come in and let them go for you if you need it. So there's definitely support out there if this is not your strong suit and you need some help.
Yeah. And let's speak to the elephant in the room, because this is why dentists don't do it, because they think if they let this person go, the practice might die. Has your practice ever died or gone? Or did you have like 3 months of production that just went in the toilet after you let a key employee go? What happens?
No. And in fact, no, it doesn't go down. It's all in your head, Right. Now I have heard horror stories, and I'm not trying to scare you, but I've heard my hygienist left and she took all our patients from her patients and stuff. And so there are somebody's probably could put a note on here to say, well, I did this and this is what happened. But if you understand that the long term of it is that it's better for your practice,
Right.
That's better to part ways with that. If you're at home, like most of the clients that sign up for Front Office Rocks sign up on Sunday night.
Really?
And it makes me sad because it means that you're worried about what's going on in your office on Sunday night. Sunday night, you should be with your family. You should be with your kids. You should be. So if you're at home thinking about an employee and you're not present with your family because of this employee, even if they're a hygienist and they're going to take some patients, it's your stress. It's your practice. And at the end of the day, you want a place that you want to go into and have fun and enjoy. And you want to be around people that you like working with. And if you're thinking like, oh, gosh, this is the day so-and-so's in the office, you didn't get into dentistry to work with people you don't like, so you need to make sure that you handle that. And it sucks doing it. But at the end of the day, no, your practice doesn't suffer. Now, I will tell you a flip side. We had a mistake of holding on to somebody. Somebody was helping run my office for a while I'm building Front Office Rocks. I had a junior office manager, and we held on to her too long. So I learned from my own lessons, right? And went into, part ways and had 3 people quit on the exact same day because there was this and that going on. Well, she's on my team. So drama had gotten into my office. Gossip had gotten into my office. Factions had gotten into my office. And in one day, I had 1.5 employees left at the front desk. So for me, that was a lesson, a wake-up call, just like you hold on to these people too long, and this stuff gets into your practice, and it ends up hurting you in the long run. So it's better to just address it and handle it when it's little or when you know it's coming and move on than to try to fix it or ignore it, which a lot of dentists do. It's not going to get better. It's definitely not going to get better.
And again, I'll just say this over and over again in case you're catching the end of the episode here and you just happen to be creeping on. This is hard stuff. And we're not by any means saying, just fire him or whatever. Our hope is that you have a well enough designed system that you're finding and attracting and hiring the right type of people so that you don't get in the situation in the first place. And you know how critically important it is to the long-term longevity of your practice. Now, any last words you'd have on hiring, like do's and don'ts for sure?
Well, I would say definitely if you're watching this or I think it's kind of weird, creeping on this, like you just said, go back and watch the hiring video. And I think you and I are talking about maybe doing some more because firing is like the end of, you can fix all this from the beginning. I hardly ever fire anybody, and I very rarely part ways with people because we take the time up front to get the right people and build the right team. If you're firing a lot, that's a problem. If you do have a lot of turnover, that's a problem. And there might be other issues going on, like how you're training and how you're hiring and how you're managing. So I don't want people to feel like, let's just keep firing until we find the right people. You shouldn't have that. But you also shouldn't be afraid to do it. So make sure that you're taking the steps to hire. I think, I haven't read the book myself, but Ann Gortziga, I think she's the orthodontist. She's got a couple books, an HR book. And so become knowledgeable in this area. I've written a couple articles on hiring. We've done a podcast. So if you feel like you're having to fire a lot or you're not finding the right people, learn how to do it well so that you don't have to fire, hopefully, very often.
Absolutely. And I usually ask this question when I'm having a beer with somebody on this whole thing. What's your craziest firing story? Like something that just totally freaked you out? Because you've probably had a few of them that you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened.
I'm trying to think. I don't know. It's not a crazy story, I guess. I actually fired somebody. We separated ways. And she had worked for me for 5 years. And she's seen me speak, and I always talk about we're not family. At the end of the day, you get paid for a job, and she and I are still friends. The day I let her go, we cried together and hugged. Oh my
goodness!
But it was one of those scenarios where she had hit the ceiling in our practice, and she was the know-it-all, and she was starting to talk back to the doctors, and I sat down and I talked to her, and she just couldn't get out of that habit. She just had become the person in the practice, and it was causing issues with the whole team. And so when I finally, at the end of the day, we sat down and I said, this just isn't working. And she and I cried, and she said, you talk about this, we're not family at the end of the day. And, I understand. And she left, and we're still friends. She's worked in 3 other dental offices in San Diego and says, our office was still the best. So, I mean, sometimes we learn as adults, we learn lessons, but I couldn't have our practice be held back from that. So not a very crazy story. I mean, I guess over a beer we'd be crying or something, but that's what we need to do, Kirk. You need to do happy hours with like a beer and we can and like tell stories.
Just absolutely. Just tell, like, I always love to know crazy stories. Now, my story of hiring was totally opposite. Like, this is we're in the 20th year of doing this right now, but I hired the first secretary I ever had. Like, I hired her and she was awesome in the interview. I'm like, she's fantastic. Like, wow. And then like 2 days later, I'm like, she's crazy. Like, and then she got crazier. And like day 4, like it got crazier and crazy. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's insane. Like, and my wife was like, you got to let her go. Like she could kill you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I think so. And like I remember I let her go on Friday and I did it in the morning. I threw up in the morning before I went to work. And then I walked in and I was like, can we talk? I've let you go. And she went, and I went, and then I ran out of the office. So it was one of those things where I'm like, I can't do that. And it was valuable for me because I'm like, I can't go there again. She was crazy. So, so don't ever let that happen in your entire existence as a practice. This is not fun stuff. It's just not. But we are going to do a little bit of that where I love to hear like the not only the applicable things to do, but I also love to hear the crazy stuff that happens because it's some way we can all relate. Now, if somebody's watching this and they have questions for you, Laura, how do we get a hold of you, Laura Hatch, and where can I find you?
Stalking them all on Facebook right now, trying to be on all these podcasts and interviews. No, you go to frontofficerocks.com. It's online 24/7. It's over 180 videos. We have webinars, we have documents, we have Ask Laura. You can message me and it comes right to me. So just go to frontofficerocks.com. And my idea is to try to be, as you see, I don't have like a certain way to make firing easier.
Right.
But I know what it's like. I do it I don't do it every day, but I run an office every day and I know that it's something that we don't like to do, but if you handle it the right way, it shouldn't be a really negative thing. And that's what I'm hoping to do is be able to be a resource for those doctors out there that might not know how to do it and need some help.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you and you're giving us a lot of help here and everybody that's listening. So sticking around for just a second while we say goodbye to everybody. Now, if you're watching this and you found this valuable, do me a favor, hit the share button because we'd obviously love for you to share it with your friends and great information because we love this profession of dentistry and every little bit helps. And if you have questions, continue to add them to the feed. We'd love to help you with some of the things that you might be struggling with or you have questions about. So until we see you next time, keep watching the Best Practice Show. You guys have a great rest of your day.